The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello all, this is Brian. This is Breaking Down Security, and this is part one of our discussion with John DiMaggio, the author of The Art of Cyber Warfare, an Investigator's Guide to Espionage, Ransomware, and Organized Cybercrime. It is a no-starch press book. He wrote it to talk about his experiences with working in state-sponsored types of attacks. He has a history of that, and we'll go into that a little bit today during our interview. We talk about some insider threat stats. We reminisce a little bit about if you've ever been in the Navy or military, your anti-terrorism and espionage videos for awareness training that you used to take. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. The book is available on No Starch. You can go to nostarch.com/art, A-R-T, -cyber warfare. And you can pick that up as an ebook or a print book with a free ebook. One of the nice things about No Starch is they'll give you the PDF and it doesn't have anything like DRM in it or what have you, which is nice on one hand because you can read it pretty much anywhere, but it does mean that you need to be responsible with your PDFs. So this first part of our discussion, and just as an aside, we talked for about an hour and a half, and the audio people who listen to our audio podcast, we have about 30 minutes of audio that's only available on our Twitch stream as a VOD or video on demand, which you can get by subscribing to our Twitch stream. If you are a Patreon supporter, I will be posting up the VOD to and anybody who donates more than $5 a month. I will be doing that here in the next few minutes. You can support us on Patreon, or you can do like a monthly subscription to our Twitch stream at twitch.tv/breaksec. So this part of part one, also we go into, you might work at a large company and your large company may or may not have an insider threat team. So we talk about how to frame that message to C-levels. Maybe it's time for you to have an insider threat team, or maybe you have one and it gets a bad rap, or maybe you are the insider threat team. So maybe John will help you help your management and your C-levels understand why you're needed, and move through those discussions more easily. So let us know if you have any comments or questions. We'll pass them along to John. You can also check him out on LinkedIn. You can find him online at the No Starch Press site for more information. So I'm going to stop talking and let you get on with part one. Hope you have a good day. I have a guest, John DiMaggio. Welcome to our stream, our broadcast, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. So I reached out to John, about a month ago, which is actually pretty good because some of our guests that we have on is a couple months in the making. So John had mentioned on his Twitter that he had a new book out called The Art of Cyber Warfare. And as we are wont to do when authors are posting up new thoughts and new ideas, and we've had no shortage of authors on the show. So I thought, let's reach out to John and get him on the show. So, John, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you taking the time. I understand you've got a conference that you're going to be at tomorrow, and we want to make sure that you get a good night's sleep. So when you're talking, we'll be able to get you on. So, maybe you could give us a little background on who you are and what you do, and why you thought the book needed to be written.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I started my career out. I was a network engineer, a Cisco guy. So I transitioned in security, but it was on the network side. Hardening networks, firewall administration, things like that. And as a hobby of mine, I was really into sort of doing open source research, and one thing kind of led to another, and it was I would say it was in the early 2000s. I think the first thing that got my attention was Iran and a lot of their hacktivist groups that just seemed to be a little too good for what most hacktivists are, and I kind of had a feeling that they might have ties to the government. So in my spare time, my friends were watching football, and I was geeking out on the computer. So I created a blog, just a WordPress blog, and I started throwing stuff up there. And several years later, I ended up getting recruited to go work for the U.S. government. I became a signals intelligence analyst. It was a great time to come in. It was right around when China was first sort of graduating their first class that began conducting espionage primarily against the United States at that point. So they had lots of intelligence analysts, but not lots of intelligence analysts with a cyber background. So with this new program, it was basically, they felt like I'd be a good fit because that is easier to teach intelligence than it was to teach current analysts, all the cyber aspect of it. So I came in at a great time. I was super interested. It was a hobby, and I just sort of never looked back. And I did that for a number of years. 2014, I got out of that, decided I wanted to go in the private sector. At that point, Sony had been hit, a number of banks, financial institutions were getting popped. And it was just, I felt like there wasn't a lot of people with expertise in the nation state espionage arena. So I felt like it was a great time to jump to the private sector. Really scary, leaving all the secret squirrel tools. I can tell you, it made me a much better analyst, going from having everything to nothing. And right. I've even to this day, even though I have lots of resources through my day job, I still like go back, like open source tools are still one of my part of my daily workflow. So and now I found myself really transitioning a lot these past, I'd say 2 or 3 years into ransomware. These guys, I feel like they used to read our reports that we used to put out publicly, we meaning the security community, about nation state attacks, and they sort of took all those TTPs and they put it into what they do today, because they're very similar, unfortunately, and advanced like we saw, nation states of the past. So that's sort of where I am. I work for Analyst One. I'm the chief security strategist. But at the end of the day, I chase bad guys and I write about it, and talk about it publicly.
Okay.
The book was a hobby, though. It was a hobby. The book was separate, but obviously that, it falls in line with my job. But yeah, it was my hobby.
Okay. Very cool. So I'm, like I said, I'm glad you were here. So the subtitle on the book says An Investigator's Guide to Espionage, Ransomware, and Organized Crime. So you're going beyond just typical malware and ransomware and those to things like espionage. I mean, how much, and I guess we could not just espionage, but we could even expand that to insider threat, or somebody
Sure.
taking bribes or what have you. But how prevalent is that in today's world?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's a great question. So about 90% of the activity that a security operations center is going to see every year is your traditional to, low to mid-level threats, your automated cybercrime, automated malware delivered by spam, meaning it's not targeted, it's not going after something specific. That other 10% is, sort of your advanced, whether it be organized crime, like we see a lot of ransomware gangs, and of course, nation state espionage threats. And even though it's only that 10%, that 10% is, when it happens, if it's handled incorrectly, is devastating. That's what puts headlines on newspapers. That's where people lose their jobs. That's where citizens lose all their private information, our healthcare records, you name it, it happens. And throughout my career, one of the things that I have, it's actually much better. It's getting much better. But one of the things that I always struggled with was arguing with leadership about why we needed people to specialize in advanced threats and why we needed to treat them differently and handle them, because they're a completely different animal. You have, human-oriented attackers with an objective, with lots of time and resources. And you shut one door, they come through the window. You close the window, they jump over the fence in your backyard. They're not going to stop, at least not quickly. That's why they call them persistent threats.
Right.
So what I did with the book is I sort of split it up into two parts. The first half of the book really just drives home both stories and, some of them specific to my career, some of them just very important to the history of espionage, but really to drive home the point that I just made of what happens when you don't handle these correctly.
Right.
And then the second half, once we've really established that point, and sort of the reader understands that, the second half teaches analysts or investigators exactly how to go about, doing, various analytical workflows, what tools to use, how to do profiling, behavior profiling, how to build threat profiles, how to use, do basic malware analysis, PCAP, and then puts everything together. And at the end, we apply everything we've learned with those resources, lots of open source tools in there as well. And we do the use case. And it involves APT28, which is a Russian GRU intelligence agency. It starts with one spear phishing email. One of the chapters I spent a lot of time teaching how to analyze the headers of emails. And anyway, we just go from that base email and just expand. And by the end of it, we've got a whole operation, and it really came together well. It made for a great use case to sort of wrap the whole book up.
Nice. Okay. So when I was in the military, one of the not just the anti-terrorism, but the espionage stuff was, the 30-year-old training videos with, Gerald McRaney on them talking about the attack on the Khobar Towers, and Robert Hansen, being the bad guy,
Yeah.
and how the
videos.
Russians, how the Russians were, giving him money to get secrets and stuff. Obviously, the motivations for espionage and insider threat are very similar to a corporate environment versus a military environment. But things like patriotism, maybe not so much. There are not all of them overlap. I mean, what is the difference in what you see in the military with spies and military secrets and government secrets versus more corporate secrets? Is it just pretty much IP, or is it actually there's other motivators there for espionage or insider threat?
I would say at one point, not all that long ago, there was a significant difference, but I think today it's much more well blended. Today I feel like, let's just go back to like 2014 when the Sony attack took place. That was really what got people's attention. It wasn't the first time a nation state attacked a private sector organization, but it's the first one that made global headlines. And I think that, since then, you've seen other nations, Iran, Russia, North Korea, do the same. They're all doing the same thing. And I think that it's easier to go after the private sector, who often have a lot of the same technologies and or build technologies that go into a lot of our defenses. It's easier to take that information from them than it was, say, the government. Now, that's getting a lot better because, unfortunately, of all these events. So I would say, that's why I said it's not as it's much more even keel as to how it used to be, because it is harder now to get into a lot of those networks. But these guys are just, one of the reasons I really like doing work with Advanced Threat is they're so interesting, and they're very creative, and you've really got to be an out of the box thinker, and you've really got to come to work every day excited about what you're doing, and feel like literally like you're hunting for bad guys, because that's how you find these type of threats. So these guys, they lay low, they'll take time. Just quick example, North Korea, the very well-known bank attack they did against the Bank of Bangladesh. And in that attack, they started a year prior to the day that they actually tried to execute fraudulent transactions. A year prior. Most cyber criminals won't spend that much time. So they're like I said, they're just a different animal. They're just a different breed of an attacker, and we just have to treat them that way. But it absolutely what sort of that patience and that well-resourced activities and groups that we used to see just targeting the government. I would say before, where it was very easy, like with Anthem Healthcare when they got hit, they got in very easily to that. It didn't take them a year to get in. Today, I guarantee you, most of the healthcare companies do a lot better job than they would have then. So it definitely we've sort of upped our game in the private sector, and we have a lot more, quote unquote experts, people that have a background similar to mine, to sort of help out with that. And I feel like we're fighting the fight. We're not necessarily winning as much on the criminal side of the ransomware gangs, but I think we're doing a much better job with the espionage aspect.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to talking about the espionage stuff, I actually work at an organization where we have an insider threat team for um, there's a lot of folks that see like you see the cop shows and are like, oh, internal affairs, you're the bad cops trying to stop bad cops from doing stuff, that kind of stuff. There's a stigma about the insider threat team or the the trying to make sure that bad guys aren't in our organization, but in doing so, they often will get a bad rap because it's like they're always trying to find something on somebody or trying to dig up dirt. How would you frame the conversation if you have a company large enough to have an insider threat team to go to your organization and say, look, insider threat is real. We're a company big enough to have insider threat issues. And of course somebody counters with, well, if we can't trust our employees, then, we don't really have a company and stuff. And it's like, how do you frame that to senior management or to C-level folks when they counter with that kind of argument?
Well, first off, you hit it right on the head. Insider threat programs they get a bad rap for whatever reason. That compared to other threats, people, they don't take it as seriously, or they think that it's not going to happen. And I think the way that you combat that today is there are some really good examples. For one, there are ransomware gangs that are literally recruiting people to give them access to corporate networks. We have a number of examples. We can go back again. Let's go back to 2014. It was one of the Mandiant's Fin groups. I don't remember which one, but these guys went into a company, and what they did was kind of ingenious. It was terrible for the company, but they didn't actually steal anything. They went in and they stole their communications so they could learn what the company was going to do. And then they used it to short the stock. They used the information to short the stock, and they made a ton of money doing it. Very illegal, but they still made millions of dollars of doing it. So, in that instance, that's how they got in, was an employee. So whether it's cybercrime, whether it's ransomware, it's getting much more popular, if you will, because it used to be the insider might do it because they're disgruntled. Today they're doing it because there's a organized criminal organization that's offering them millions of dollars to stick a USB drive into a computer or to give them administrative credentials. And we catch some of them, but I guarantee you there's ones that get away with it that we don't know about. There was that doctor just recently who was working with a ransomware gang, and it affected hospitals and patients. It was terrible. So there's so many examples now, but that mentality is still there. But to answer your question, there's so many examples now. I feel like we have a lot more to come to the table with that argument which would just leave somebody looking a little bit silly who's trying to argue that doesn't happen in this day and age.
Right. Yeah. I actually I put a URL in our chat and in the Zoom chat there where Perluigi from Security Affairs had mentioned Lapsus is openly, recruiting for insiders in various organizations. And the thing that I've got is they have very few requirements, which is great for when you're trying to hire somebody. Wait, that's not the right way to go with that. But if I usually they need, 3-year degree, and in 5 years for a junior position and stuff. So, they're actually writing a good job description here. But if I was any of the companies on this list that they're targeting, I would be worried. Not just from the insider threat, organization, but it's like freaking obviously Microsoft, Apple, of course, IBM or similar. So, I would be worried being called out specifically in these organizations, especially like AT&T or Telefonica or what have you. And this is the most brazen that I think I've ever seen. I don't know. I assume this is on something like Mastodon or what have you. But yeah, it's just really interesting how brazen they are on these things.
Right. Well, look at Conti. I mean, with the Costa Rica government, that's how they got into that. According to them, they say that
Yeah.
insiders to do that. I really think out of all of the areas of the threat space, that is probably I would say second to ransomware as far as growth in criminal activities, where we're seeing a rise because it just feeds that ecosystem right now, and it's easy to get people. And the problem with companies is you can do background checks all day. I could be a great employee, but that doesn't mean that a year from now somebody offering me 500 grand or $1 million or whatever just to give them my credentials, that I'm not going to say okay. Like, you don't know what people are going to do, is my point. So
Yeah.
having programs like what you're talking about, what you do, like that, it's imperative. And it's kind of like, I feel like insider threat is like where sort of that advanced threat or espionage response used to be years ago, where people just discounted it. I feel like that's sort of insider threat. Like, people still want to argue that. And I think that, 5 years from now, that's not going to be an argument. But I feel like today we're still having that argument, which is crazy to me, which is why
Right.
we have so many headlines about it, because we're getting our asses kicked with it.
Yeah. So for organizations that have to deal with insider threat, are there technologies that they could employ? I'm thinking, like some kind of behavioral
Yeah.
heuristics, or I mean, back in the day, it used to be, well, we would just turn off all of our Windows NT boxes. You're not logging in after 5 p.m., so nobody should be logging in after 5 p.m. unless it's, somebody specific, or, looking for logins at an odd hour, or why did Bob come in, or why is Bob staying late? That was the military stuff. It was like the military training. It was like, if
Right.
if anybody's coming in super late or staying super, early, or coming in super early, and I was like,
Right.
well, nowadays that's somebody who likes to work 80 hours a week, not necessarily an
Right.
insider threat, because we don't limit people coming into work anymore. So
Right. Right.
what
Exactly.
kind of technologies can people employ, especially if they don't have an insider threat team to work on and look for insider threats? I mean, obviously, if you know everybody in your small startup company, it may not be the same as if it's, a 30,000 person company or a small to medium
Right.
business.
I mean, it's sort of a multiple parts to this. I mean, the perfect answer is, let me give you that first, would be to have some sort of a EDR that sort of monitors the endpoint activity and what's going on your network and what's going in and out, and the day-to-day keystrokes by administrators and what tools they're using and things like that. But that alone, doesn't work. So sort of the EDR, most of those today are based on artificial intelligence and threat modeling and things like that. That's fantastic. But even with that, because I was a threat hunter, even with that, you still need humans to go in. And a perfect example is, because if it is an insider threat, a lot of times you're going to have someone with legitimate credentials doing things on a network that might look like your regular day-to-day activity. But then you notice something like, why are they running PowerShell commands that are base64 encoded? What are
Right.
these guys doing? And that's what it's not going to pop up as an alert like, hey, this is bad, necessarily, because it fits a normal business profile or behavior. But having a human being go and look and see what they're doing, and that's what where really threat hunting on top of that comes in, is a great solution. Now, if you don't have the resources to do all of that, at a minimum, I mean, antivirus and automated defenses today, you have different tiers. It still has come a long way from where we were 10 years ago. Just using that, and even having one or two analysts to monitor that, and to do the day-to-day hunting is a necessity if you're going to find advanced threats, insider threats, anything with a human that's got a goal and objective behind it. It requires a human, because like I said, not everything, we're past the days of where something just pops up and says, hey, this is bad. It just doesn't happen in
Right.
every case anymore.
Right. So there's I used to work at a threat intelligence company, and we had, cutesy little names for our threat actors. Some use APT-28, like you had said. There's APT-1. You have Incontinent Bear, and all those out there like that, and
And yeah,
Slippery
like,
Weasel and whatever. Um, the so each one of these groups or orgs or countries, in this case, if they're a nation state actor, or actually there's crimeware actors now
yeah,
that they've got names for.
yes, they
Um,
do.
uh, do they do they know enough to, and this may sound like an ignorant question, but do they communicate with each other to coordinate attacks, or like, hey, we're over, is like the old gang, block wars or something. It's like, oh, we're over here in the telecom sector. Leave this alone. Don't play with this, because I could imagine with as many threat actors as there were out there, you would be stepping on people's toes, or you would be finding shells that, oh, okay, well, the crimeware guys over here, oh, Russia left us something in the back end here. Or do they communicate, or say, hey, we're next week we're going to attack AT&T, leave that alone, we'll share what we have with you. Do they share that kind of information, like anti-threat?
Yeah, so I did a research project in April of 21. I published the data from it, but it was into just this, looking into how criminal organizations shared resources, to what level they had relationships. And so we picked sort of the ransomware ecosystem, which is primarily Russia and Ukraine. Most of the core gangs were based out of Russia. A lot of the affiliate or hackers for hire, if you will, were in the Ukraine. And these guys worked together, but they were different groups. And what we found was a lot of the hackers for hire, because there's only so many guys that are really good at hacking, they would sort of share and bounce between these groups. And what we did is we looked at sort of the how they were paid through cryptocurrency, and we would find some of the same wallets being paid by different gangs to them. So then we started to look at the resources, and what we found is there were sort of technical breadcrumbs that they left that sort of proved this sort of proof of concept that these guys did work together. And it was, what we found was there were a lot, like not just one or two. Like in one of the use cases, we found 5 groups that were working together, not only with the tools, but they were literally sharing victim data and posting that data to their own name and shame websites. And they were sharing infrastructure. So even some of the malware that they used, not the ransomware payloads, but some of your delivery malware that was unique and not publicly available, they were sharing those resources. So my point being is it is a much smaller ecosystem. And now what I found is I've really gotten into fake personas and getting on the dark web, and getting involved with bad guys, and getting information from a human aspect as well. And what I found with that is a lot of these guys talk and work together, and some of them don't like each other, others do, but the point is they know one another, and it's just crazy. And I still think to this day a lot of organizations don't understand that, but that really does make it a bigger threat because of that organization, because of those resources. When one guy goes out because something happens and somebody else steps in to fill in, it's usually not just because they were there to go in. They already had their relationship, and they were already ready to sort of take that crown, if you will, to fill and to pay all these this affiliate program to keep that ecosystem going with all the money and the wheels churning.
Okay. I'm looking at chapter 3, and I see human-driven ransomware. There are exploit kits, and there are ransomware. People create ransomware and sell it. So there's actually a secondary market for creating ransomware that people actually buy and then use themselves. Kind of like buying home equipment or something. We're Conti, but we're using an Atheros chipset, or we're using a wireless router from D-Link, but it has an Atheros chipset in it. So they've built the kit for you to use somewhere else. When ransomware is based on families, so they're different families, different TTPs. When you say human-driven ransomware, is that pretty much phishing, or is there other human-driven ransomware out there?
Yeah, no. So what I mean by that is, prior to 2015, the all the ransomware that we saw was, it wasn't targeted. It was basically spam campaigns where they hoped to hit individual users. Your home computer, give me $300, or a business computer, give me $500. As where today, it's an organized effort where there's a human on the keyboard who's getting into your corporate network and spending anywhere from days up to 3 weeks. That's what we found anyway when we went and looked at our data and did a study on. Right. We picked like 1.5 groups, and they were spending all this time in their network. So it's somebody with hands on a keyboard in your environment, enumerating it, getting the administrative privileges, staging all the malware, turning all the ransomware, turning off security controls, and then finally executing the payloads across the board all at once. But it was a very organized operation that was driven by humans on a keyboard, and it used to not be. It used to just be, again, automated spam. If your security software caught it, that was it. So that's sort of the difference. And we first saw that in 2015 with SamSam. That was really the first model that's still used today, where you saw, an organized group taking over an entire enterprise for a large scale ransom. Now that ransom's gone up from what it used to be, a couple 100,000, and today we see them, as high as, I think, Apple in 2021, there was like $50 million or something crazy, so it's definitely getting worse. But the point is, it all started very basic, and it's just evolved.
Okay. All right. So ransomware usually comes with a price tag. In this case, you've been infected by ransomware and you have to pay some kind of crypto, and Bitcoin being the most popular. The price of Bitcoin has dropped dramatically, and there is a lot of instability in the crypto market. And since, in the before times, for those of you who are listening to this, it seemed like ransomware first started using like eGold, or the Russian eGold stuff. If I'm incorrect, please feel free to correct me there, John. But how is the volatility of the cryptocurrency market going to affect ransomware in the future? Is it going to just, is it just going to be, well, they're just going to pay us more Bitcoin because it's worth less now? Or what does it look like for the volatility of that market versus, and how it's going to affect the ransomware?
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's a great point there. So here's the thing. When I'm going to answer your question, but let me just add something to that. When a victim pays the ransomware payment, that money does not actually end up to where the ransomware criminal can use it for months. So the laundering process takes a lot of time. So the value before, up until like this year, the past several years, that's worked out for them because it's been going up. And now we're seeing the opposite, where it's going down. So because of that, now ransomware criminals really have to sort of forecast that for whatever they want. If they want to have something, let's say that's $5 million, they almost have to do that when it's worth, if it's worth 3.5 million, they have to ask for what they think or project it's going to be in 3 months to hit that. If it's going to be 5 million, and ask for that greater amount. So I think we're still sort of seeing that evolve, but yes, that's definitely something that is affecting the prices of the ransomware demands. But also remember, it's not just encrypting data anymore. Now they're stealing your data. So they're doing double extortion, and they're seeing, well, I'd say it's probably only 10 to 15%. We're seeing some groups even do a triple extortion, where they're also doing a distributed denial of service on top of that. So your computer data is locked, your sensitive data is stolen and being leaked and threatened to be published on the internet. And then your customers can't even get your infrastructure, because even if it is up, they're doing denial of service attacks. So I never blame companies who pay ransom anymore. Like I know the FBI and a lot of the federal agencies say never pay, but it's just not realistic for a business to make a decision that I'm going to go out of business because I'm not going to pay this. Like it's just not realistic anymore. So it's a big problem. I don't know what the answer is for that. But the other thing that I just want to throw out there with the Bitcoin currency is, when we saw DarkSide get when there was two attempts. One, there was an attempt by the U.S. government. It's Washington Post says it was Cyber Command that did an operation, went in, took control of a bunch of their servers, and were able to get the private key and take back a bunch of money that Colonial Pipeline had paid to them a couple weeks prior to that. And then it was the following month, we saw the FBI actually go and put in court paperwork, which is now posted on the Department of Justice website, where they actually did the same thing, thing, but they actually asked to do it publicly before they did it. But the point is, in both situations, money was extracted, something that isn't supposed to be able to be done. So now, because these ransomware groups have done stupid things like affect, us being able to get gas on the East Coast, for a week, they've got national intelligence agencies, the intelligence community, and all these resources being used against them. So and on the forums, they're afraid of that. That's something they're like, okay, well, we made a mistake doing that, and there is a fear now because of that. In addition to when the FSB went in and kicked in 25 doors and arrested 14 people back in January with the REvil arrests, like that had never happened before. Now, granted, I get with Russia, that's probably never going to happen again, and that was sort of done to grease the wheels because they were planning to invade the Ukraine. They wanted to play nice with the U.S., but regardless of the reason, it had never been done before. So it's just, there's a different thought process and a different fear that is there that wasn't there a year and a half ago. And I will give, I'm not one to just say it. I will give, the U.S. a pat on the back for that, because I didn't think that was possible to even put a dent in sort of that ecosystem. And now we've got a lot of people looking over their back. Even with hiring affiliates now, there's such a process to ransomware affiliates. There's such a process now to vet them. When you go in to do an interview with them now, they ask you Russian folklore questions that are not on the internet, so you can't get answers to prove that you're a Russian national. Like, it's just crazy the things that they have to do now. So they're very paranoid. So that's a good thing for us.
Right. So in our last stream, there was a news story about Conti kind of falling apart because apparently they're made up of folks from Ukraine and Russia and other countries, and like the leaders of Conti spoke up in favor of the Russian government, which apparently did not sit well with the Conti team. And so some data got leaked, and Conti, I don't want to say they split up or, or what have you, but their tactics have changed to pretty much just a slash and burn operation now, and not so much ransomware. Given that some ransomware companies and companies, well, they are companies, aren't they? Organizations are starting to back governments in this case, or being a proxy for those governments. You mentioned, they're trying to prove their Russianness to each other in interviews, but are we going to continue to see that? Are we actually going to start seeing maybe ransomware groups attacking, for Western governments like the UK or even the US or one of the Five Eyes groups? Are we going to start seeing potentially ransomware of Russia? And since, the U.S. has certain rules of engagement and Western organizations have rules of engagement, will we start seeing proxies being used in U.S. government stead?
God, I hope so. I'd love to start.
How do you really feel about that?
I mean, it gets old just getting your ass handed to you every day. And that's what's happening with the ransomware attacks. The Conti story is a win, but it's not because anything that law enforcement or a government did. It's something that a lone researcher did. And that's my point. Sometimes you can go a lot farther without having your hands tied and letting sort of private sector community help you out with this stuff. So I would love to see that, happen to where we could do patriotic hacking back, because right now we can get punched in the face, but we can't punch back. Right. And so, yeah, it may not be a popular feeling, but that's all I do is see the worst of the worst with this stuff, and it gets old. But I don't think that's going to happen, but that I would love to see it happen. What I do think though about, like the Conti aspect, what you said, a lot of these groups, they run their organization like a business. And, the Russia-Ukraine war is sort of the first time that we really saw your business model versus your patriotism being tested. And I think that because it was done at such a public level, with Conti, they had over 200 employees. And in those leaks, you had all of their conversations and chat logs and their business details of how they ran their operation. I mean, they were even doing recruiting on job, employment websites. So it was run like a business, and right. That structure and that huge employee base all fell apart because of those leaks. So yeah, they're still operating today from like a persona aspect, and they are. I mean, look at Costa Rica. You can't say they're not still being effective, but they're very different than what they were. And they're trying to hold on and bring that back. And they're on the ropes right now. I don't know whether they'll be here a year from now or not, but they're trying to hang on. But the point is that, in my opinion, like law enforcement, U.S. government, when this stuff happens, we really got to capitalize on them. And when these guys are down, we need to hit them. Right. And, at a classified level, maybe that's happening. I don't know. But I hope so, because, we can't do it in the private sector. You can't do it as a lone individual legally. It's a felony to hack. And, so somebody needs to do something. So like I said, we are starting to see dents be made, but I don't think they're being made fast enough. So I hope that does change. And I hope that we continue to move forward with that. But it's just an area where we're not winning right now.
That was it for this episode with John. You can find us on Twitter at Brakesec, Brakesec. You can follow me, Brian Brake, on Twitter. Miss Berlin can be found at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR. Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned. That's BOETTCHERPWNED. I'm on Mastodon at Brian Brake. And you can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other fine podcast purveyors. So hope you enjoy that. You can join our Discord by going to discord.gg/Brakesec. That's our vanity link. And thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and our subscribers on Twitch for helping with our tip jar to, finding value for value and supporting us for things like InfoSec Campout, for instance, which is our conference. It's happening the 26th through the 28th of August. You can check us out at infoseccampout.com. There's a link in our show notes for that. And you can also follow InfoSec Campout on Twitter for announcements. We have tickets available if you want a backyard camping experience. We're not roughing it. And we would appreciate everybody coming, submitting a CFP so you can come and talk. And yeah, it's going to be a great couple days. The August in the Pacific Northwest is a glorious time of year. So hope you can find your way to coming and joining us for that. That's all for Breaking Down Security this week. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another. Try to find some empathy. And, as always, take care of yourself, because you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.